The first crack in the carefully constructed facade of my life appeared not with a shout, but with the cheerful, two-tone chime of a family group chat. It was a sound that usually heralded mundane updates, a blurry photo of my father's latest grilled cheese masterpiece, my mother complaining about the neighbor's dog, or a meme from my younger sister, Chloe, that I was too old to understand. But this message, arriving on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday in early December, was different. My phone vibrated against the granite countertop, pulling my attention from the mountain of client invoices I was processing. A flicker of annoyance warred with habit. I should ignore it. The Henderson account wasn't going to reconcile itself, and every minute counted once my 5-year-old son, Leo, was dumped from the school bus, a whirlwind of untied shoes and boundless energy. But the compulsion to check, to stay connected, was a deeply ingrained reflex. I tapped the screen. Mom, hello, my darlings. With the holidays hurtling toward us, your father and I have had a brilliant idea. This year, we're ditching the traditional chaos and treating ourselves to a proper, adults-only Christmas retreat. We've booked a cozy cabin in Lake Tahoe for the week of the 25th. Just us, snowshoeing, fine wine, and blessed silence. No hectic cooking, no frantic gift-opening marathons. We can do a small gift exchange with the kids when we get back. Think of it as a much-needed reset. The words, punctuated by a relentless string of snowflake and tree emojis, didn't immediately compute. I read them once, then again, the cheerful tone a stark contrast to the cold stone settling in my gut. Adults only. Blessed silence. My eyes drifted from the screen to the living room, where evidence of the hectic chaos she so wanted to escape was permanently etched into the fabric of my life. A lone, sparkly blue sock was peeking out from under the sofa. A faded sticker of a dinosaur was clinging stubbornly to the coffee table leg. A faint, waxy crayon mark streaked the wall near the light switch, a testament to Leo's artistic fervor. A retreat. From us. My fingers, clumsy and cold, hovered over the keyboard. A dozen responses fought for dominance. What about Leo? He's been talking about building a snowman with Grandpa for weeks. Or, so, just to be clear, the kids includes your 5-year-old grandson? Or the simple, wounded, why? Before I could type a single word, the chat exploded with enthusiasm. Chloe, OMG yes. This is genius. Mark and I are so in. We could all use a break. Count us in for the wine tasting. Mark, sounds perfect. Looking forward to it. Mark. Chloe's husband of 2 years. The golden boy with the finance job and the perfectly curated Instagram feed. The one who always knew the right wine to bring and whose presence seemed to validate my parents' sense of social standing in a way my own life never could. I was 34 years old, a single mother who had built a fragile but functional life through sheer force of will and a relentless freelance career I conducted after Leo was asleep. My world was a carefully balanced ecosystem of deadlines, daycare schedules, and trying to ensure my son felt loved and secure in a home that only had one parent. My parents' house, with its constant, predictable noise and the lingering scent of my father's pipe tobacco, had always been the anchor, the safe harbor. It was the place where I could, for a few hours, set down the immense weight of being solely responsible for another human being. Now, it seemed, the harbor was closing for renovations. And I wasn't even being offered a rain check. The rational part of my brain, the part that had gotten me through childbirth and tax audits, tried to intervene. It's 1 year, Maya. They're allowed to want a quiet vacation. It's not a rejection. But the deeper, more primal part, the little girl who still craved her parents' approval and the mother who ached for her son to feel unconditionally wanted, heard a different message. A clearer one. We want a Christmas without the complications you represent. Without the sticky fingers, the early mornings, the noise, the mess of your existence. I took a slow, shaky breath, the air tasting thin and insufficient. I couldn't respond. Not in the chat, where my words would be dissected by Chloe and met with my mother's infuriatingly calm rationalizations. Instead, I typed a private message to my mother, my thumbs feeling thick and stupid. Maya, just saw the chat. Leo will be disappointed, but I hope you have a lovely time. I hit send before I could code it in more sarcasm or suffocate it with guilt. The response was almost instantaneous, as if she'd been waiting for my private objection. Mom, oh, honey, don't be like that. It's just 1 year. You'll appreciate the quiet, too. We'll have a special day with Leo after New Year's, I promise. He won't even remember. And there it was. The gentle dismissal. My feelings were an overreaction. Leo's connection to his grandparents was so insignificant he wouldn't even notice its absence. The crack in the facade widened, and for the first time, I allowed myself to peer into the darkness that lay beneath the surface of our perfect family. This wasn't about a cabin in Tahoe. This was about where we stood. And for the first time, I was forced to consider the terrifying possibility that we were on the outside, looking in. The silence that followed my mother's text was more deafening than any of Leo's tantrums. I navigated the next few days on autopilot. I smiled at Leo's drawings of Santa and Grandpa on a rooftop, I hummed along to Christmas songs on the radio, and I buried myself in work, the blue glow of my laptop a lonely beacon in the late-night hours. But beneath the surface, a cold, hard knot was forming in my chest. The initial sting of rejection was slowly crystallizing into something else, a deep, unsettling clarity. I had been saving for months, not for a vacation or for myself, but for a gift. My father, a man who found his greatest joy in tinkering, had been sighing over his aging, rust-spotted Jeep Cherokee for a year. "Transmission's getting moody," he'd grumble, or "the heater sounds like a dying animal." I'd found it by accident, a pristine, low-mileage 2016 Ford Explorer, dark blue like his old one, but with all the modern features he'd never admit he wanted. It was a stretch. A massive, heart-pounding stretch. It would clean out my meager savings and mean tightening our already tight belt for another 6 months. But the image of his face, the genuine, unguarded shock and joy, had become my own private Christmas movie. I saw it as my grand gesture, my proof that I, the single mother with a messy life, could also deliver something magnificent. That I was a successful daughter, not just a capable survivor. I'd parked it at my friend Sarah's garage, the keys wrapped in a small box with a printed photo of the car tucked inside. It was supposed to be the surprise that would unite us, the tangible evidence of my love and my place in the family. Now, the thought of that gift felt foolish, almost pathetic. A desperate plea for validation that was about to be returned to sender. I said nothing. I didn't argue. When I called my parents a few days later, and my mother reiterated the adults-only plan with breezy finality, I just murmured, "I understand, Mom. Have a wonderful time." The words tasted like ash. I was letting them off the hook, and they didn't even know there was a hook. They just assumed I was finally being reasonable. Christmas Eve arrived. Leo and I built a fort in the living room, ate pizza, and watched The Grinch. His small body was warm and trusting against mine. "Is Grandpa going to call to track Santa on the NORAD website?" he asked, his voice heavy with sleep. My heart splintered. It was a tradition. "Not this year, baby. Grandpa and Nana are somewhere with very bad phone service," I lied, the falsehood coating my tongue. "We'll track him ourselves." Christmas morning was a flurry of wrapping paper and delighted shrieks. Leo was overjoyed with his new dinosaur figures and art set. I made pancakes, poured too much syrup, and smiled until my cheeks ached. The emptiness of the house, however, was a presence in itself. It was too quiet. The phone remained stubbornly silent. In the afternoon, while Leo was engrossed in assembling a plastic T-Rex, a notification popped up on my iPad. It was a Facebook alert. "Chloe Miller is tagged in a photo." A cold dread trickled down my spine. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it was self-flagellation. But I tapped it anyway. The screen filled with a burst of color and noise. It wasn't a snowy cabin in Tahoe. It was my parents' living room. The very same living room where Leo and I had decorated the tree just 3 weeks prior. The familiar garland was draped over the mantelpiece, the same antique ornaments hung from the branches. And in the center of it all, beaming, was my family. My dad wore a ridiculous reindeer sweater I'd never seen before, his arms slung around Mark. My mom was holding a glass of champagne, laughing at something just outside the frame. Chloe was snapping a selfie, her face pressed against Mark's. And in the background, lounging on my father's favorite armchair, were two lanky, unfamiliar teenagers, their phones in their hands. The caption read, "When the family grows. So much love this Christmas. Welcome to the chaos, Sean and the boys. Hashtag family first, hashtag Christmas chaos, hashtag new additions." I stared. I zoomed in. I studied every pixel. The chaos she was hashtagging was the very thing she claimed to want to escape. The new additions were Sean, Chloe's friend, colleague, and his two nephews. Strangers. They had taken our spots. They were sitting on our couch, in our home, on our holiday. The lie wasn't just a lie, it was a brutal, public erasure. The cold knot in my chest exploded into a white-hot fury. It was a clean, sharp, clarifying rage I had never felt before. It wasn't just hurt, it was outrage. I didn't cry. I stood up, walked to my bedroom, and retrieved the small, wrapped box from my closet. I took a picture of it, the festive paper a cruel joke. Then I opened it, took out the photo of the blue Explorer, and snapped another picture, the car, sleek and perfect, parked in Sarah's garage. I opened a new text to my father. I didn't write a paragraph. I didn't explain. I simply attached the photo of the car and typed, "Maya, I don't think you need this anymore." I pressed send. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. It was the most definitive action I had taken in years. The response was not a text. 40 minutes later, the doorbell rang, followed by an impatient, heavy knocking. Leo looked up from his dinosaurs, startled. "Is it Santa again?" "No, baby. Just a delivery." My voice was eerily calm. "Go play in your room for a minute." I waited until I heard his door click shut. I walked to the front door, my hand steady, that cold, sharp feeling armoring me. I opened it. My father stood on the porch, his face flushed not from the cold, but from a familiar, simmering anger. He wasn't alone. Next to him, looking uncomfortable in a designer sweater, was Mark. "Maya," my father began, his voice low and tight, bypassing any greeting. "What the hell was that? Is this some kind of joke?" "The car," Mark added, trying for a conciliatory tone and failing. "That's a really nice gesture, Maya. Really." I didn't invite them in. I just stood there, blocking the doorway, my arms crossed. "It was a gift. I'm rescinding it." My father's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't just take back a gift. What is wrong with you? Is this about the Christmas thing? Your mother told you, it was just a quiet year." "It didn't look very quiet on Facebook," I said, my voice flat. "Looked pretty chaotic. Lots of new faces." He had the decency to look momentarily chastised, but it was quickly replaced by renewed irritation. "For God's sake, that's different. Chloe sprung it on us last minute. Sean's family is out of state, and the boys' parents are going through a rough patch. We were just being hospitable." "Hospitality you couldn't extend to your own grandson," I stated, the words hanging in the frigid air. Mark shifted his weight. "Maya, come on. Don't be like this. Look, your dad and I were talking. If the car is really just sitting there. Chloe and we're thinking about starting a family soon. A reliable SUV would be a huge help for us. To get on our feet. If it's really meant for family, then it should go to where it's needed most, right?" The audacity of it stole my breath. Not only did they feel entitled to the gift, but they were now redirecting it to the golden child, justifying it as a better investment in the real future family. The family that didn't include my son. I looked at my father. "Is that what you think too? That Mark and Chloe, who have 2 full-time incomes, need this car more than I needed the savings I blew to buy it?" "This isn't about need, Maya, it's about doing something good for the family," my father snapped, his patience gone. "This is the kind of gesture that should bring people together, not tear them apart. You're being selfish." The word was a match to gasoline. Selfish. Selfish. I repeated, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Let me tell you about selfish. I was selfishly working a second job since August to buy that car for you. I was selfishly lying to my 5-year-old son, telling him his grandparents were too tired for him, while you were playing Santa for 2 teenage strangers. He made you a card, Dad. With a glitter snowman. It's on our fridge. He asked if Nana would have the special marshmallows for the hot chocolate. I had to tell him we were making our own holiday magic, all alone. I turned to Mark. And you? Do you think it's normal to bring your buddy and his kids to a family Christmas, knowing the actual grandchildren were specifically uninvited? Mark looked at his shoes, a flush creeping up his neck. My father's jaw was clenched so tight I could see a muscle twitching. You are being dramatic, my father hissed. This is a misunderstanding that you are blowing out of proportion. Now, are you going to be reasonable? Let's just go see the car. We can talk about this like adults. He took a step forward, expecting me to capitulate. That was the pattern. He would get angry, I would back down to keep the peace. But the pattern was broken. I looked him dead in the eye. Maybe. I saw the hope flicker in his face, the certainty that he had won. He had reasserted control. I let that hope hang in the air for a single, suspended second. Then I said, no. The word was quiet, final, and absolute. His face went slack with shock. What did you say? I said no. The gift is not yours. It never was. You need to leave. Now. For a moment, they both just stood there, frozen, unable to process this new version of me. The compliant one was gone. The easy one was gone. I was a fortress, and the gates were closed. Maya, you are making a huge mistake, my father said, his voice trembling with rage. I think I'm finally correcting one, I replied. I closed the door. The knocking started again, louder, more frantic. I didn't move. I stood behind the solid wood, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a fierce, terrifying sense of freedom. I'm calling the police, I said, my voice raised just enough to be heard through the door. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. The calmness of the threat was more potent than any hysterics. The knocking stopped. Through the peephole, I watched them. My father was gesticulating wildly, talking to a silent Mark, who just shook his head. Finally, they turned and walked away, 2 figures swallowed by the twilight. I slid down the door onto the floor, the adrenaline draining from my body, leaving me trembling but utterly, profoundly clear. This was the line. And I had drawn it in steel. The climax had passed not with a dramatic showdown, but with a single, simple, world-shattering word, no. The silence that settled after I closed the door was a physical thing, thick and heavy. I slid down to the floor, my back against the solid wood, and listened to the frantic hammering of my own heart. It wasn't fear. It was a strange, pulsating emptiness, a void where a lifetime of compliance had once resided. I had just shut the door on my father. I had said no, a word that seemed to have no translation in the language of our family dynamics when it came to his will. A few minutes later, I heard Leo's door creak open. Mommy? Are you crying? I quickly wiped a single, traitorous tear from my cheek and stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. No, baby. I'm okay, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I walked to his doorway and saw his small, worried face peering out. Everything's fine. Just. A loud deliveryman. He accepted this with a child's faith, his concern instantly replaced by the pressing matter of his new T-Rex. Can he eat pancakes? Absolutely. A very nutritious breakfast for a dinosaur, I said, forcing a lightness into my tone that I was far from feeling. The rest of the day passed in a surreal haze. We built a labyrinth of blocks. We watched cartoons. I smiled and nodded, all the while feeling like I was observing our life from a great, cold distance. The world had tilted on its axis, and I was the only one who knew it. I thought that would be the end of it. A clean, if brutal, break. I was naive. The next morning, I took the trash out before Leo woke, the early winter air biting through my hoodie. As I rounded the corner to the dumpster, I saw it. My old, dependable Honda Civic, which I'd left parked on the street, was sitting at an odd, slouched angle. A cold dread, colder than the morning air, washed over me. I walked closer, my breath catching in little white puffs. Both rear tires were completely flat. Not just low. Slashed. Clean, vicious cuts, right through the tread. Surgical. Deliberate. I stood there for a long minute, just staring. The anger that came then was different from the white-hot fury of the day before. This was a cold, sinking, absolute certainty. This wasn't random vandalism. This was a message. A punishment. This was the consequence of my no. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just took a picture with my phone, the image stark and damning in the gray morning light. I didn't call the police. What would I say? I had no proof. Just an ugly, gut-wrenching hunch that my own father, or the ever-eager-to-please Mark, or someone they had complained to loudly enough, had done this. The who almost didn't matter. The why was crystal clear. The tow truck cost $150. The 2 new tires set me back another $400. That was January's grocery and gas money, gone. I transferred the funds from my already anemic savings account with a sense of grim finality. I didn't tell anyone. I just took care of it. I always did. That was the thing they never seemed to understand. I figured it out, even when I shouldn't have had to. That night, after Leo was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my budget notebook. Under car emergency, I wrote $550. I didn't bother to label it revenge. It didn't matter. I knew what it was, and a part of me knew it wouldn't end there. This was just the opening salvo in a war I hadn't asked for but was now determined to win. A few days later, fueled by a cold resolve, I drove my newly tired car to my parents' house. I didn't call. My mother answered the door as if I were a missionary peddling religion. There was no "How are you, honey?" No "How are the kids?" Just a guarded, "Maya. This is a surprise." "I bet," I said flatly. "Did you know someone slashed the tires on my car? The day after Christmas." She had the decency to look startled, but it was quickly masked by a practiced neutrality. "What? On your street? That's terrible. You should report it." "Maybe someone in the family has it out for me," I said, watching her closely. She blinked, then shrugged, a delicate, dismissive gesture. "Don't be dramatic, Maya. It was probably just some kids. You know how that neighborhood can be." The cold indifference in her voice was more damaging than any accusation. There was no concern, not even a pretense of it. I was a problem to be managed, a dramatic narrative to be dismissed. I just nodded, turned around, and left. I didn't even get back in the car. I walked the 2 blocks to my father's auto body shop. He was under the hood of a sedan, but he straightened up when the bell on the door chimed. He didn't smile. "Figured you'd come around." "I'm full of surprises," I said. "Like slashed tires. Know anything about that?" He wiped his hands on a greasy rag, giving me that tight, smirking shrug he used when he was feigning innocence. Hazard of city living. Then he looked at me, and the mask of indifference slipped, revealing a flash of pure spite. Maybe this whole car thing wasn't such a good idea after all. He laughed, a short, harsh sound that went through me like a shard of glass. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked out. On the drive home, the dam finally broke. Not into tears, but into a flood of crystalline memories. Every forgotten birthday, every unreturned phone call, every time they'd canceled a visit with Leo at the last minute for something more important. The pressure built in my chest until I thought it would crack my ribs. I had to stop pretending. I had to stop hoping. New Year's came and went. I didn't reach out. I didn't post a hopeful message. I just stayed quiet. Leo and I celebrated with sparkling apple juice and noisemakers at 8 p.m. The silence from my family was deafening, but I was slowly learning to hear the peace within it. Then, 5 days into the new year, my phone rang. It wasn't my dad. It was Chloe. That alone was a shock. She hadn't spoken to me since the confrontation. Her voice was weirdly calm, stripped of its usual performative energy. Dad was in a car accident. He's okay. Nobody was seriously hurt. I waited, saying nothing. I knew there was more. He rear-ended someone on an icy road. In the Jeep. She paused. And it turns out he let his insurance lapse back in November. The other driver is not happy. He's on the hook for everything. I let the information settle. The poetic justice of it was almost too perfect. The man who criticized my every financial move, who preached responsibility, had driven uninsured for months. Then came the kicker, delivered with a subtle venom that told me she, too, was caught in his web. He was on his way to meet someone. A woman. Not Mom. Some woman he met online. So that was it. The stress, the secretiveness, the need for a quiet Christmas. It hadn't been about me or Leo at all. It had been about covering for his own double life. The entire foundation of my guilt and hurt crumbled, replaced by a vast, desolate landscape of disgust. I didn't ask why she was telling me. I just hung up. Later that afternoon, he showed up at my door again. This time, he was alone. No Mark, no bluster. His jacket was soaked with slush, and he looked old, defeated. He stood on my welcome mat for a full 10 seconds, just staring at the ground. Then he asked me for help. He said the other driver was demanding compensation, that his savings wouldn't cover it. He needed a loan. And if I still had that Explorer, maybe he could just use it for a while. Until he got back on his feet. He phrased it as if it were a practical, logical next step, as if my previous no had been a temporary lapse in judgment. I didn't invite him in. I looked at him, this man who had mocked me for being a single mother, who had called my life messy, who had chosen strangers over his own grandson, and who was now standing in the wreckage of his own deceit. Does Mom know about the woman? I asked, my voice quiet. His face shut down instantly, a mask of guilty panic. I didn't wait for an answer. I reminded him of every barb, every criticism, every time he'd said my kids were too loud or too much. I asked him if he wanted me to teach him how to lie to his wife, the way I'd had to learn to lie to my son to cover for his absence. He stood there, silent and shrinking before me. I let the silence stretch, then I gave him a small, cold smile. I'll think about it, I said. I watched the hope flicker in his eyes. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it, to still hope for my rescue after everything. Then I said, no. His mouth dropped open. You can't be serious. I didn't repeat myself. I didn't explain. I just looked at him until he finally, truly, understood. The power dynamic, for a lifetime tilted in his favor, had irrevocably shifted. He stood there for another moment, a phantom waiting for keys that would never materialize, then he turned and shuffled back through the snow. I closed the door. This time, there was no knocking. I leaned against it, and for the first time in months, I took a deep, full, unimpeded breath. It felt like breathing for the very first time. The war was over. I had won by refusing to fight on his terms anymore. I had simply walked off the battlefield, and in doing so, I had found my freedom. The decision to stop paying for Chloe's beauty therapy course came to me like a switch flipping. It wasn't born of rage, but of a profound, unshakable clarity. I was done financing the very people who saw my children as an inconvenience. I opened our transaction thread and sent a single, unambiguous message. Maya, you'll need to handle next month's payment yourself. The red receipt popped up instantly. For 2 hours, there was only the silence of digital shock. Then, my phone lit up with her call. I ignored it. She called again. Then the texts arrived. Chloe, I thought you supported me? Colleen, I thought you wanted us to succeed. Us. Not her and me. Her and Mark. Maybe her and Mark and Sean's nephews, for all I knew. That one word made it clear. She wasn't just taking from me, she felt entitled to it, as if my support were a permanent, unchangeable fixture in her life, like I owed her the same way my father had felt entitled to that car. I didn't answer. I left her on read, a small, potent act of defiance in the digital age. The next day, my mom called. I was halfway through folding a mountain of Leo's tiny clothes. I let it ring. She left a voicemail, her voice strained with a performative worry. Maya, honey, it's Mom. I'm worried. I'm hoping we can talk this out. Please call me back. I didn't. But she tried again the day after. This time, I answered. I needed to hear it, to sear the finality of it into my memory. She got to the point faster than I expected. Have you spoken to your father? No. A pause, a calculated shift in tone. Do you have any idea who that woman was? The question hit me like a physical blow. He hadn't told her. She'd found a breadcrumb, a text, an email, and was fishing for confirmation from me, the disgraced daughter. I refused to be her source of intel. I refused to be pulled into their toxic drama. I don't know anything, I said, my voice flat. She switched gears, the concern evaporating into thinly veiled accusation. And you're really not going to help them with this car situation? Your father is incredibly stressed. This has spiraled, Maya. This isn't the time to hold a grudge. It's not a grudge, I replied, the clarity steadying me. It's a conclusion. I finally understand where I stand. I didn't let her interrupt. I reminded her how she told me to keep the kids home for Christmas. How there were strangers laughing in their spots. How no one, not once, asked how they were doing. I took a breath, delivering the final, quiet blow. When was the last time you even spoke to your grandson? The silence on the other end was absolute. It was the sound of a truth so obvious it had become invisible to her. Maybe it's time you started figuring things out without me, I said. Just like I've always had to figure things out without you. Then, I hung up. That night, the Miller clan group chat, a place that had long been a graveyard of recycled holiday memes and obligatory birthday wishes, went completely dark. No awkward Happy New Year messages. No how is everyone? Nothing. The silence was a tangible presence, and for a moment, I felt the weight of it, the finality of being orphaned from the story I'd always thought was mine. But then I sat on the floor with Leo. We made lopsided paper snowflakes and watched a cartoon about a talking train. He laughed at something utterly nonsensical, a pure, unburdened sound that filled the room. And in that moment, the weight lifted. I felt a calm, solid peace settle in my bones for the first time in my adult life. Over the next week, Chloe stopped posting her filtered selfies with motivational quotes. My mom stopped forwarding recipe videos I never asked for. My father disappeared from my digital world entirely. By the time February arrived, it was official. We were no longer pretending to be a family. The quiet wasn't awkward anymore. It wasn't a tense silence waiting to be broken. It was just absence. A clean, empty space where noise and drama used to be. And in that space, my son and I began to breathe, to live, to expand. One night, after Leo was asleep, I opened the photos on my phone. I scrolled through our Christmas, his smiling face smeared with chocolate, the proud display of his dinosaur, the glittery card for grandparents who never came. Then I swiped to the pictures of the slashed tires, the tow truck receipt, the Ford Explorer sitting pristine and untouched in Sarah's garage. I looked at it all, the pain, the betrayal, the evidence of my resilience. Then, on a whim, I opened a flight booking app and typed anywhere warm. I wasn't seriously planning to go, it was a fantasy, a mental exercise. But when I saw a flash deal, round trip to Clearwater Beach, Florida, 4 nights in a modest, family-friendly motel, I clicked book without overthinking. I didn't want to plan it to death. I just wanted to go. I paid for it with the money I hadn't spent on their gifts, money I'd saved from the second job meant for the Explorer. It was money earned from my sacrifice, and now I was spending it on our joy. I told Leo we were going on an adventure. I didn't mention who wasn't invited. We flew out in the last week of February. He was mesmerized by the clouds. The motel was cheap, with thin towels and a noisy air conditioner, but it was clean, and the beach was 2 blocks away. The moment his little feet hit the sand, he ran towards the ocean with a scream of pure, unadulterated joy. It was the sound of freedom. Every day, we collected shells. Every night, we ate pizza and watched cartoons. On the second day, I posted a single photo. Not for them. For me. It was of Leo, his face lit by the golden sun, holding up a lopsided sandcastle, his smile brighter than I had seen in years. No hashtags. No captions. Just us. I knew they saw it. They just didn't say anything. On our last night, as the sun set over the gulf, my phone vibrated. A single text from my father. Dad, did you really sell the car? That was it. No, how are you? No, how is my grandson? No apology. No acknowledgement of the accident, the other woman, the slashed tires, the months of silence. Just a transactional question about an asset he felt he had a claim to. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I had already given him my final answer months ago, standing in my doorway in a moment of terrifying, liberating courage. When we got home, I sold the Ford Explorer within a week. I took the cash, paid off the last of a high-interest credit card that had been a millstone around my neck for years, and put the rest into a savings account for Leo. The weight that lifted was astronomical. A week later, Chloe texted me. Guess you're done pretending to care. I didn't respond. The truth was, I wasn't pretending anymore. I cared, fiercely and absolutely, about what truly mattered. My son. Our life. The warmth in his eyes when he feels safe and loved. The peaceful, unassailable space I had built for us without asking for anyone's permission or approval. I used to lie awake at night wondering what it would take for them to see me, to value me, to finally take me seriously. Now, I found the most profound peace in the realization that I no longer cared if they ever did. They had their chance to be a part of our story. They chose, again and again, not to be. And we were, finally and completely, okay.